Welcome to Audio Bear Shorts YouTube channel. Have a nice day. Next is the short story, Colors of Mountains and Rivers, romance genre. My good brother held a knife to my neck, forcing me to admit that I was a woman. If you don't agree, I will have to marry your sister. Jin Yi An angrily gritted his teeth. That crazy woman hit my head when she was 15, I will die in her hands. My name is Wen Shi Ning, the eldest son of the Protector General, and also the only male child of the family. I and the Prince of Ming Yi Palace, Jin Yi An, studied together for 3 years, climbed walls to skip school together, dug birds' nests together, we did all kinds of crazy things. I consider him a brother, and he wants to marry me. What a great disloyalty. I slapped his handsome face like jade, pushed him away, sat up and brushed the dust off my sleeve. I am a man. Jin Yi An covered his face, and pounced on him again as if he was hungry and couldn't control himself. I don't care if you are a man or a woman, you are this beautiful, wearing makeup, drawing eyebrows, wearing a dress, you can definitely fool everyone. He wanted to marry my sister, but it wasn't voluntary. Ming Yi Wang and my father were sworn brothers, and in the past, they had set a marriage contract, the eldest daughter marrying the eldest son. Therefore, he had to marry her. Before, when Jin Yi An hadn't met my sister, he was very happy, always saying that having an older brother like me, my younger sister would definitely be no less. Until 2 years ago, Jin Yi An, who was 19 years old at that time, met Wen Shi Ning, who was 15 years old, and then, she used a piece of coral to punch a big hole in his forehead, and Jin Yi An avoided her like a snake from then on. At this time, Tan Dian had already carried me out, muttering as he walked, Wen Shi Ning, if you do good deeds, do them all the way. If you send Buddha, send him to the west. If you marry there, I promise I will treat you well. Just pretending to be a woman, it's not that difficult. I took a deep breath and said, next month I have to go to the battlefield, I don't have time to joke with you. As soon as I finished speaking, my body suddenly froze. We are brothers after all. I felt that I had spoken a bit harshly, so I opened my mouth to comfort him. Don't miss me too much. If luck is good, I can still return to the capital during the holidays. You work hard, give birth to a grandchild for me. Our friendship as fellow disciples will not be in vain. No. Jin Yi An's voice was filled with sadness. He turned around and hugged me. You saved me, you saved me. Jin Yi An, come here with your life. A roar like a lion's roar rang out from behind. Jin Yi An quickly kicked open the door, changed from carrying to carrying, and tried to open the window behind. She's here. She's here. In his panicked voice, the door behind was immediately shattered. Wen Shi Ning held a long sword, full of majesty. That Jin guy, I heard you want to marry me? She stood there, sneering non-stop. Jin Yi An put me down in front of him and forced a smile. Female hero, calm down. I fell in love with your elder brother at first sight. I definitely won't marry you, it's just, he and I are not accepted by the world. I beg female hero to be merciful, let Shi Ning borrow your name to marry me. Wen Shi Ning narrowed her eyes, turning her gaze to me. Brother, are you willing? If he forces you, I will definitely make his head leave his body. Wen Shi Ning had a hot temper. I was afraid that we wouldn't be able to settle things properly, so I temporarily agreed and said to her, Shi Ning, I have something to tell him, you go back first. Before leaving, Wen Shi Ning rudely said, Brother, you can rest assured and go, I will go to the battlefield in your place. As soon as she left, I picked up the coat that had fallen on the ground and walked out. Jin Yi An grabbed me. Where are you going? I pulled on my sleeve. Home. Okay, I'll have my family make you a set of clothes that fits you. Do you like jade, pearls, or 5-colored threads, and phoenixes? Or do you need all of them? I shook his hand off. It's up to you. When I returned to the general's mansion, it was already dark. I went to the martial arts arena, and under the cover of night, my father was still sitting there, staring blankly at the empty courtyard. He heard the movement, turned his head to look at me, and then waved, Come and sit. I nodded, and sat down not far away. Shi Ning, are you ready? I replied, it's fine. He glanced at me, his voice deep, the family's official career depends on you. Go to the battlefield and win fame and glory. I thought for a moment, Father, does Yu Ning really have to marry Jin Yi An? I don't think she wants to. He coughed lightly, avoiding the harsh and trying to speak softly. It's okay, if she has a hot temper, marrying over there won't be a disadvantage. My family doesn't have a son, you are the eldest sister, please advise her, so that mother in the afterlife can rest in peace. I nodded, and went to Ngunin's room. She was cleaning the cold long sword, not raising her head. Sister, don't advise me, I grew up on the battlefield with my father, I can't stand being with a bunch of idle literati, I was born to kill enemies. I sighed, the battlefield is dangerous, swords have no eyes, I'm a girl, don't get involved. When Yu Ning's eyes were blazing, Sister, you're also a girl, you knew how to read at 3, you wrote poems at 5, you rode a horse and shot arrows and charged into the imperial city at 7, if you were a man, you would have been a prime minister long ago. You can do it, why can't I? When Yu Ning stood up abruptly, these past years, I've seen with my own eyes that you've become quiet and taciturn, I know you don't like these things, you're not the only woman in our family. Wen Yu Ning. My voice was as cold as ice, wishing I could wake her up. Or are you afraid that I'll surpass you? She completely turned her back on me, using force to push me out the door, not seeing me for a month. I thought the matter had been quietly resolved, but unexpectedly, on the day of the wedding, I woke up in a flower palanquin. All around me were the sounds of firecrackers and noisy people. I lifted my veil, and before my eyes was a string of pearls swaying, making me dizzy. Suddenly I remembered last night before when Yu Ning got married, she had shown a guilty expression, personally pouring wine to apologize. After drinking 1 cup, she passed out. How outrageous! How crazy! A letter fell out of her swaying sleeve. I picked it up, when Yu Ning's strong and powerful handwriting was clearly visible on the paper. Brother, seeing this letter is like seeing someone. When you see this letter, I will have already gone to kill the enemy. See you again. I slowly clenched the letter, silently cursing, damn it. Things have come to this point, I can only adapt to the situation, I cannot lose face for the Ming Yi manner. The flower palanquin just stopped, the matchmaker loudly shouted, the bride gets off the palanquin. Immediately after, a hand reached out from outside the curtain. It was slender and white, with well-formed bones. Seeing that I had no reaction, he bent his hand and beckoned, softly saying, don't be in a daze, hurry up. The person suddenly squeezed his head through the gap of the curtain. Miss, I beg you. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly stopped, our eyes met. Jin Yi An's eyes were glued to my face, her fair face gradually flushed, not long after, it was as red as a persimmon. I calmly looked at him, he also looked at me. After a while, a bright smile gradually appeared. Ning Ning, this husband has come to pick you up. The incident happened suddenly, from when he found out that I was marrying in place of my sister until he carried me out of the palanquin like a bandit, all in the blink of an eye. I struggled unconsciously, but to no avail, I coughed softly, this is too much. Jin Yi An didn't care, he carried me over the big fire basin. I was originally worried about how to keep this little life and at the same time bring your sister into the house, but now I don't need it anymore, it's a waste if I don't eat my brother's tofu. I looked at him in frustration, facing his curious gaze. Don't say it, you're really beautiful, if you were a woman, I would marry you. I was so angry that my blood was rushing back up, I pursed my lips and didn't say anything. The lights had just come on, Jin Yi An had just brought me into the bridal chamber. Before I could say anything, I was dragged away to the banquet in the front yard. As soon as he left, I grabbed the veil, rummaged through everything in the room, took out the hidden dowry, casually wrapped the bed sheet into a bag, threw it on my back, opened the window and left. Suddenly, a group of people appeared in the yard. The sound of the window opening startled them. In an instant, our eyes met, and we fell silent. I kept my posture of climbing out the window and froze in front of the door. The arrogant young master stood in the middle, stunned for a moment. His expression changed. He rushed forward and hugged me tightly, smiling at everyone. "My wife is joking. You're making fun of me. You're making fun of me." Everyone was as quiet as chickens. Jin Yi An hurriedly carried me into the room, closed the door. His handsome face became serious. "Ancestor, what do you want to do?" I pushed Jin Yi An's hand away. "Wen Shi Ning will go to Baekwan tonight. I'll take her back." Jin Yi An turned around and hugged me, pushing me into the room. "What are you talking about? Her long legs are on her body. Can you cut them off?" He and I looked at each other for a while, then suddenly turned around and ran out. Jin Yi An quickly pulled me back. "So many people are watching. Can I have someone else help you find them?" Seeing that I was still unmoved, Jin Yi An leaned against the window, spread his arms wide to block in front of me, and advised, "Young master, when the city gate is closed, you're wearing a bright red dress and running around the street. Are you afraid that people outside won't know that you're dressing as a woman today, marrying me, Jin Yi An?" I held my head, my forehead twitching. It was really not worth it. If my father found out and took me back, he would definitely have his legs broken. Jin Yi An saw that I was not moving, and breathed a sigh of relief. "Calm down, I have sent someone to chase after me. Within a few days, there will definitely be news. Before that, I will trouble young master Wen to suffer for a few days." Seeing him so confident, my depressed mood gradually subsided. Although Jin Yi An was good at flattery, he was also a rare outstanding junior in the capital. He was the only son in the Ming Yi Palace, forced to learn all the great schools of thought, learn the ways of power and strategy, and was very trustworthy in his work. I threw down the bag of things, sat on the bed. What should we do now? Jin Yi An had already taken off his red brocade robe, and sat close to me. The faint smell of alcohol wafted into my face, but it was not unpleasant. Or, should we consummate the marriage early? His eyes were shining, not knowing if he was joking or deliberately looking for a blow. "Jin Yi An, can you hear what I am saying?" Tan Yi An retracted his smile and stood close to the bed. "Look at you, I was just talking nonsense. Outside, aren't there people listening? You're a big man. What are you afraid of being teased about?" "Tan Yi An, come here." He shook his head and stood straight. "Don't be so polite." I don't know when, he had retreated to the chair. I frowned, reminding him, "Don't run." Tan Yi An took another step back. Then I opened my eyes wide to see Tan Yi An's back foot trip over the small chair, hit the small tower, and fell face down. His front teeth hit the edge of the table, making a clear clack sound. On the wedding night, the crown princess was too naughty, causing the crown prince to be injured, and the imperial physician had to be called in during the night. The old imperial physician tried hard to hold back his laughter. His old face flushed red, but he still appeared calm. "Your Highness, your tooth is just a little chipped. It doesn't affect your appearance. You need to pay attention to what you eat. You should eat lightly. The food shouldn't be too hot or too cold." Jin Yi An covered his mouth, looking exhausted. "Don't make a big deal out of it. Don't make a big deal out of it." A few days later, Jin Yi An resolutely slept on the small tower, pretending to be bullied by me, often ordering me to make tea and pour water. I was naturally quiet and didn't like to talk much, so I let him be. At night, he wanted to share a bed with me. At first, I was very opposed, until he pulled me, telling me the story of the Wang family's widow and the 18 concubines of Zhang Yuanwei, telling it to the point where the listener would fall asleep, without any thoughts of love or lust. Then I gradually felt at ease. During that time, Princess Ming Yi sent people to eavesdrop several times. Knowing that the wedding night was not progressing, she came up with a plan and asked me, a bride, to accompany her to the meeting. Our Wen family is full of rough people. How could we ever go to such places? When I knew that I was going to have to wear several kilograms of jewelry to appear at Princess Xiang's birthday party, my mind felt like it was going to explode. I stared blankly at a peony outside the window for a long time, unable to think of a solution. Jin Yi An raised his peach blossom eyes from the book, raised his eyebrows. Brother Wen. Brother Wen. I retracted my gaze, quietly looking at him. Jin Yi An shamelessly smiled. Please help me see which young lady has a good figure. I pulled out my long sword, pointed at his neck. You don't keep your manly virtue. I married my younger sister to you, not for you to admire beautiful women. Jin Yi An carefully used his index finger to push the blade away. You're too harsh. Aren't I here to help you choose? Princess Ming Yi didn't know when she appeared at the door, coughed softly. What are you doing? Jin Yi An immediately changed his attitude, snatched my sword, held it in his hand and played with it, and said carelessly, Here, teach Ning how to practice swordsmanship. After saying that, he compared the sword on his neck for a while. Look, if you're in danger, just slash here. I knew he was helping me cover up, so I asked at the door, Mother, is there something wrong? Princess Ming Yi replied, Bring me some cloth. Tomorrow at the banquet, there will be only young ladies from noble families. You Ning, you must follow me and be careful with your words and actions. I knew that tomorrow would not be an easy day. Before I could reply, Jin Yi An raised his eyebrows. She doesn't like noisy places. Let me go in your place. I stared at the back of Jin Yi An's head, and could hear the calculations in his head clicking. He liked the young ladies of the Ouyang family, the younger sisters of the Xian family, the widows of the Lu family. As long as they were beauties who could breathe, he liked them all. Princess Ming Yi glared at him. A banquet for women, there's no place for you. Behave yourself and wait in the front courtyard. After being scolded by her, the next day I was supervised to wear jewelry. In the gorgeous jewelry, I was like a puppet pushed into a carriage. The birthday party of Princess Xiang gathered all the beauties. Princess Ming Yi led me through the corridor, attracting many gazes. Many young ladies whispered and pointed at me. Of course I knew Jin Yi An's reputation in the hearts of young girls. Before we were classmates, every day when I woke up, there were many beautiful flowers in front of the window, all sent to Jin Yi An. I sat in the middle of a group of elders, my mind wandering somewhere, occasionally hearing a few sentences. There are 3 types of unfilial piety. Having no offspring is the greatest, blessings last forever, giving birth is a woman's duty. In my heart I thought about the chapter on the art of war I read last night. Gradually, I heard inappropriate words. The Wen family doesn't have a woman to teach them. Your father is busy training soldiers, teaching his daughter to behave rudely. Ordinary people can't stand it. Only your mother-in-law doesn't blame you, leaving you in the palace to teach you wholeheartedly. That's your blessing. Princess Xiang's appearance is dignified, but her words are getting more and more unpleasant. The people around also agree. The princess and mother-in-law are here. How can you be careless, not replying a word? I have never been in and out of the inner palace, not good at dealing with this situation, momentarily stunned on the spot. Unexpectedly, this reaction made everyone even more dissatisfied. Even Princess Ming Yi frowned. Did I teach you like this at home? What did I say just now, do you remember? What did mother say when I wasn't here? The pearl curtain suddenly lifted. A young master with bright eyes and a carefree demeanor walked in. He was wearing a light red round-neck robe, a golden hat inlaid with jade, luxurious and splendid, immediately attracting the attention of all the young ladies in the room. Jin Yi An leisurely came before me, bowed to Princess Ming Yi. I was bored in the front yard, so I specially came to the backyard to listen to the aunts and uncles discuss. After speaking, he signaled me to give up my seat. I breathed a sigh of relief and stood behind him. Princess Xiang smiled gently. There was no intention of scolding in her words. Long time no see. Princess Ming Yi smiled. You've been in the library for several years. You've been unruly. You don't even pay attention to the rules. Jin Yi An returned to the previous topic. What did everyone say just now? I coughed lightly, signaling Jin Yi An to stop asking. He seemed to understand, touched his nose, and said with a smile, recently, Guinfuang restaurant has a new beauty, the dance is wonderful, I was planning to come and see tonight, mother, please help me in Gunin, forgive me this time. Such chaotic words, taking all the blame on herself. Princess Ming Yi could not sit still anymore, and shouted softly, making a fuss, you just got married, how could you come to such an indecent place? Tan Dian smiled, let her scold, and stood up after a while, where is my purse? Is the embroidery done? I was stunned for a long time, unable to react. Tan Dian placed one hand on my shoulder, I knew you forgot, let's go home and embroider for me. I was pulled out by him, walking in the small flower garden. Jin Yi An changed his calm demeanor from just now, boasting to me, Brother Wen, how was it? Did I perform well just now? I looked at the bright smiling face in front of me, took a step back, thank you. Jin Yi An didn't notice my discomfort, smiled and said, why don't you thank me a little differently? What's the matter? I counted 1,000 times, not counting on Jin Yi and asking me to treat him to some flower wine. He threw a handful of silver notes on the table, boss, call us the most beautiful young lady to serve us. It was rumored that the young ladies here were beautiful, he arranged them himself, and was kind enough to arrange one for me. The charming young lady leaned against me, brought good wine to my lips, and gently said, young master, drink wine. My whole body stiffened, trying to suppress the discomfort in my heart, looking at Jin Yi An, who was surrounded by gentle fragrance, naturally like a fish in water. He looked through the thin silk and asked me with a smile, Brother Wen, we are both men, don't be so formal. After saying that, he gently pinched the hand of the girl beside him. Her laughter was sweet, playing with him. I jumped up, afraid that these actions would dirty my eyes, so I didn't look around and opened the door, I'll go out and wait for you. I threw a bag of money behind me and hurried out of the flower shop. The lights had just turned on, the red-sleeved building, the pipa music never stopped. I stood in the middle, finding it difficult to blend in, facing the dark night sky and letting out a murky breath, hearing Jin Yi An hurriedly chasing after me from behind. Ning Ning, what's wrong with you? I jumped onto the carriage myself, looking down at him from above, did you have fun? Jin Yi An only glanced at me, and immediately saw that my mood was not right, pushed the beauty away, brushed off his clothes and climbed into the carriage, no more playing, let's go home. On the way, neither of us said anything. The smell of powder and rouge slowly drifted through the air. The carriage rolled over the green stone slabs, occasionally a few stones would lift the wheels, the carriage would sway, causing the silver bells in the corners of the carriage to ring. Jin Yi An moved his arm and said, Ning Ning, I'm afraid you'll be bored at home. If you don't like it, I won't take you anywhere in the future. I've been diligent in my studies since I was young, and have never had any makeup on me. Even the cinnamon candy that the girls on the street corner love the most, the taste of it has faded from my memory over the years. This prosperous and gentle place is an unattainable dream in my heart. According to my father, I shouldn't have the slightest desire for it, because I was born to belong to the battlefield. Tonight, I finally understood that Jin Yi An and I are not the same kind of people. Ning Ning? Jin Yi An's voice called me back to reality. I frowned slightly, you should still call me Brother Wen. No, you live at home, you can't show any flaws. Jin Yi An propped his chin up, the bright moonlight shining on the side of his face. If mother makes things difficult for you, remember to tell me. For a moment, I was stunned, softly replied. Looked away, feeling empty inside. When I returned home, it was already late at night, my whole body was tired, after bathing I crawled into bed, Jin Yi An didn't know what he was busy doing outside, I couldn't wait for him, and fell asleep early. Half asleep, half awake, I heard someone talking outside. Tomorrow, the princess wants to establish rules for the crown princess, she can't skip the morning and evening greetings. She's already asleep. The crown prince isn't sleeping, how can she sleep first? Jin Yi An laughed coldly, you like rules so much, why don't you establish rules for me? This old slave doesn't dare. She is my person, the rules in the courtyard are up to me to decide. Tomorrow morning I will go to the greetings in her place. The crown prince. She comes from a rough background, if she isn't restrained, she will embarrass you in the future. I woke up from my daze, opened my eyes, and saw two figures behind the screen, one standing and one sitting. Tan Yi An put one foot on the chair. I advise you not to cause trouble. I married Wen Shi, so I won't let anyone in the mansion say a word about her. I didn't look where I was going and bumped into a rock, so what? The voice died down, the other person reluctantly bowed his head. This old servant has already passed on the message, I hope the crown prince will explain clearly. I stared at the figure sitting still on the screen, feeling a little lucky. It was right for Yu Ning not to marry here. My father was troubled by my mother's matter, always wanting to find a good place for Yu Ning. Her personality was lively, innocent and naive. Ming Yi Wangfu, to her, was a prison, not a salvation. Fence. The beaded curtain gently, the lights outside were turned off. I quickly closed my eyes, pretending to be fast asleep. Through my eyelids, I could see a dark shadow falling in front of the bed. After a while, Jin Yi An let out a soft sigh, also climbed up, and pulled the blanket for me. Ning Ning? I pretended to reply with an, and moved inside. After a while, I felt my face itch. Only then did I realize that Jin Yi An was touching my face. I suddenly opened my eyes, facing his gentle and meaningful gaze, and immediately froze. Jin Yi An's eyes gradually changed from peaceful to terrified, his hand still on my face, not yet retracted, stammering, "You don't misunderstand. I saw a mosquito." A huge wave rose in my heart, a crazy and absurd thought crazily collided with my reason, trying to explode. Could it be, likes men? Seeing Jin Yi An's ears red, his face frantically explaining, I quickly turned around, closed my eyes, go to sleep. Jin Yi An's hand stopped in midair. After a long while, he let out a sigh, and said softly, "Don't think too much, I still really like to hang out in brothels." I know. My mouth agreed, but in my heart I had already started calculating how to help Yu Ning get a divorce. The next day I woke up early. Jin Yi An didn't know where he had gone. I recalled the conversation last night, hesitated for a moment, let the maid help me put on makeup, went to the princess's courtyard to pay my respects. Late spring, the weather wasn't hot yet, occasionally a breeze blew by, swaying the gold chain in my hair. It was very pleasant. In the distance were young girls playing noisily, the swing swayed in the wind, the young girls' skirts fluttered. I stared blankly, standing under the corridor, recalling my childhood. My mother used to stand behind me, pushing me high in the air. I could see outside the fence were women selling tofu wearing short skirts, and children chasing each other. My skirt was filled with summer, and my mother's gentleness. After my mother passed away, these things no longer belonged to me. Father said, my arms were not for holding the swing, but for holding spears to fight enemies, protecting the country. Crown Princess, it's not early anymore. The servant spoke, interrupting my train of thought. Through the window, the princess saw me. Jin Yi An appeared at the door at some point, wearing a bamboo green round-necked robe with a white belt, noble and elegant, smiling and saying, "Let her see, she is the crown princess of the royal palace. What's wrong with looking at the swing for a while?" Cough. Princess Ming Yi expressed her dissatisfaction in a low voice. Jin Yi An continued her topic, "Mother, I usually hate people making noise the most. If she comes to greet me every day, I won't be able to sleep well." Princess Ming Yi looked hesitant, but, she is your wife. Whether she is good or not is only for you to know. Why set up rules? Princess Ming Yi glanced at me, who was pretending to be deaf, sighed, "I know you are close to your elder brother. I also don't want to make things difficult for her. But you and father are in the imperial court. If the woman in the inner palace is controlled by others, I'm afraid someone will harm you. I was afraid that Jin Yi An would quarrel with Princess Fei because of this, so I nodded and replied, mother-in-law's words are very correct. From now on, the daughter-in-law will not miss the morning and evening greetings. Jin Yi An looked at me in shock. Princess Ming Yi's expression relaxed a bit. I know you are a sensible person, if you give birth to 1 or 2 children. Jin Yi An's expression immediately became extremely unpleasant. Mother, I will take her back first. After saying that, without waiting for me to react, Jin Yi An hurriedly pulled me out of the courtyard. I haven't greeted my mother yet. What greeting? Do you want to hear her talk about giving birth? Jin Yi An's ears turned red, his eyes evasive. My whole body felt like it was being electrocuted, feeling his palm burning, the bad feeling came again. Can you let me go first? My voice was stiff, unable to speak. Jin Yi An suddenly realized, as if burned, he let go. I'm not an idiot, I understand what is silently circulating in that ambiguous air. In the distance, the young girl giggled, swinging higher and higher, like a free bird. The gardenias rustled, their fragrance spreading, but it couldn't erase the awkwardness between him and me. He lowered his eyes, took a deep breath, and touched. I said, do you like that girl over there? Huh? I followed his gaze and looked back. The girl on the swing had a bright smile on her face. Jin Yi An secretly glanced at me, gritted her teeth and said, that's my distant cousin, if you like it, I'll help you two find a match. It turned out that my actions had caused him to misunderstand. I shook my head, and said with a faint smile, no need, I just find that swing interesting. Jin Yi An's eyes flickered slightly, gradually becoming bright. Do you want to play? Want to? Ever since my father told me to change my appearance, I no longer considered this issue. It wasn't whether I wanted to or not, but whether I should or not. Men shouldn't like swings. Jin Yi An naturally put his arm around my neck. Don't be shy, you're a woman now, no one will laugh at women swinging on swings. Even though it was just a light sentence, it was like a strand of hair falling into the heart, scratching an itch. The dream that had been cherished for many years was like a seed, sprouting out of the ground. Jin Yi An smiled and walked towards the little girl, took out a few coins, and said, Yen. Your sister-in-law wants to try playing, you take the money, go to the end of the street to buy candy to eat. The little girl swayed a few times, fell to the ground, happily took the money, looked at me with her eyes, and said with a smile, this big sister is so beautiful, her dress is also beautiful. As a lovely child, I patted her head, sent her away, then sat on the swing. Raising my head, there were dense foliage and dappled sunlight. The wind and sunshine were warm. Jin Yi An stood behind, sit tight. His hand pressed against my back, pushing me slightly. The feeling of losing gravity for a long time enveloped me. The spring breeze brushed past my ears. At this moment, the sky was right before my eyes. The swing got higher and higher. I gradually opened my arms. Miss Yen Ni. Suddenly, a cry of surprise rang out from outside the wall. I caught sight of the highest point, clearly seeing Yen Ni being caught by a big man, running towards the corner of the street. Tan Dian, call someone. I kicked my leg, using the momentum to fly up to the top of the wall, falling outside the wall. The big man was scared by me, instinctively pulled out a knife and stabbed me. I was afraid that he would hurt the child, so I pulled her towards me. Yen Ni cried out. While struggling, I accidentally pulled my sleeve, causing my movements to stop for a moment. The knife grazed my waist and stabbed in. The dull pain did not slow down the speed of the move. I bent down and swept my leg. The big man fell to the ground. I threw Yen Ni towards the guard who was running towards me. My other hand locked the big man, my knee pressed against his back. The knife was close to his ear and stabbed into the ground, coldly saying, "Who sent you here?" The big man struggled frantically, shouting, "Spare my life. I just want to steal some silver." But his moves were clearly different from those of ordinary robbers. The knife was made of refined steel, not something ordinary people could have. I pressed the knife close to his neck, whispering in his ear, not telling the truth. Do you need me to draw some blood? Ning Ning. Suddenly, I was pulled up by someone, falling into an embrace. Jin Yi An's face was gloomy. He gritted his teeth. Hold him back, don't let him escape. In the blink of an eye, the big man was tightly surrounded by the guards. Big sister is bleeding. Yen's face was still covered with tears, sobbing non-stop. I was about to say it was okay. Jin Yi An carried me up, his face cold as he shouted, call a doctor. My heart tightened. No. My men, don't worry. His men couldn't be at ease even more, stubbornly saying, no need, it's just a small wound, I can handle it myself. Nonsense. He kicked the door open, and went through it without any problems. He put me on the bed, and took off my coat. I struggled to get up. What are you doing? Don't move. Jin Yi An's voice was stern. Let me see. I endured the pain, pushed him away. I don't need you. We're all men, what are you afraid of? It's you. Disguising as a man is a crime against the monarch. Absolutely cannot let anyone find out. As soon as he finished speaking, Tan Dian stood still, his face pale, as if someone had discovered his secret. He took 2 steps back. I pressed the wound tightly, endured the pain and pulled back my messy outer garment, leaned against the wall and slowly breathed, lessening the pain. Ning Ning. Jin Yi An stared at me, softly discussing, can you let me see the wound first? I won't touch it. Get out. I felt the chest strap seem to loosen, my voice was urgent. Jin Yi An moved his lips, after a long while he lowered his head, clenched his fists. Sorry, let the doctor come in. No need. My forehead was covered in sweat. Get some wine, I'll handle it myself. That big man's move was vicious, almost piercing through a layer of skin under my ribs. Luckily the chest strap protected me, the wound wasn't big. I had followed my father in and out of the battlefield for many years. This kind of injury was already all over my body, adding one more wouldn't be much. Jin Yi An didn't know when he had left, only the maidservant was left outside. I bit the blanket tightly. As soon as the strong wine was poured on the wound, the pain caused cold sweat to flow down, the moans were blocked by the blanket, the room was left with only the sound of uneven breathing. Your Highness, do you need me to call a physician in? Using some demonic powder might be better. I tried to muster up some energy to refuse her. Those who have been on the battlefield for a long time, how could they have the conditions to use demonic powder? They were all in critical situations, unable to bear it anymore, only using a little. Not long after, I finished treating the wound. Exhausted, I collapsed onto the blanket. Change the water. As soon as I opened my mouth, my voice was hoarse. The maid came in, saw the basin of blood-red water, was so scared that she cried out, trembling as she carried it out. At night, I had a fever, half asleep, half awake, returning to the battlefield. That year, I was young, riding a horse to chase and kill, going deep into the enemy's army. An arrow pierced my shoulder blade. Finally my father pulled me away from the enemy army, threw me into the tent, said, if you don't get better tomorrow, then go home. I dreamily grabbed a person, asking for water. After a long sigh, a cup of tea was brought to my mouth. I was like a traveler in the desert, trying to absorb the sweet spring, cup after cup. Finally, he stopped me from asking for water, hugged me tightly, rest a bit then drink. My throat was dry, I had to endure, nodded. Does it hurt? It doesn't hurt. I was anxious, holding that person tightly. If it hurts, say it, I'm here. Don't worry, Father, I'm not hurt. Afraid that he wouldn't believe me, I kept repeating, I'm not in pain, tomorrow will be fine, don't make me go. In a daze, I finally passed the night, and when I opened my eyes in the morning, I still hadn't escaped from the nightmare. I stared at the ornately decorated windowsill for a long time. The shabby military tent gradually faded away, and then I remembered that I was in the Ming Yi Palace. I moved slightly, and Jin Yi An suddenly woke up, crawling up from the bed. Ning Ning, do you want some water? I swallowed, my throat was dry and I couldn't speak, I just nodded. Jin Yi An wiped my eyes, stood up and went to pour some water. You were here all night? He turned around and replied, yes. The doctor said you need someone to watch over you, they are all women, I'm not at ease. I was silent for a long time. Jin Yi An quickly added, wait until you get better, I'll go. Hearing his reminder, I realized that, yesterday in the chaos, he seemed to accidentally reveal something. Jin Yi An just turned around, and met my scrutinizing gaze. He lowered his head in confusion, stood far away and handed me the cup of tea. Take it yourself. I didn't know how to explain this for a moment. He liked men, and he also liked me as a man. But I wasn't a man. You and I, our paths are different. After half a day, I could only dryly force out such a sentence, hoping he would turn around in time. Jin Yi An's hand was still hovering in the air, the steam from the teacup inside quietly rising, floating in space. I know. Jin Yi An's voice was dry, his eyes were gloomy and determined, but that doesn't conflict with the fact that I like you. Indeed. My heart sank, for a long time I didn't know what to say. I never even thought that he would like me, and it would be this kind of distorted feeling. Sorry. After a while, I could only squeeze out 3 words. Jin Yi An nodded, stuffed the teacup into my hand, and retreated to sit far away. My heart was in turmoil. Is there any news about you, Ning? Jin Yi An bowed, put the teacup aside. Yes. Let's get a divorce. I raised my eyes, and tried to use a calm tone to say, from now on, our 2 families will not have any contact. The knife in the big man's hand came from the barbarians outside the border. They were the enemies of the Wen family. I couldn't give him any answer, so I had to cut it off cleanly. The light in Jin Yi An's eyes immediately darkened, and he finally replied, okay. Ever since Jin Yi An agreed to the divorce, he disappeared. I lay in bed to recuperate for a few days, then called someone to move me out to the hallway, and when I had free time, I watched the little girls swinging on the swings in the distance, and half a day passed quickly. Candy and cakes suddenly appeared on the windowsill every day, until one day, I saw a small figure running away in panic in the distance. Only then did I realize that Yan Ni had always felt guilty because of this matter. I secretly packed my luggage. One night, I opened the secret letter from the Wen family. Barbarian knocking on the door. Young master, come quickly. Father didn't know where he had heard about my whereabouts. He asked someone to send a letter, not many words of reproach, just a few words, redeem your sins by doing good deeds. It seemed that I couldn't wait until tomorrow. The moon was clear and bright, the wind outside the window was extremely soft. I took off the golden hairpin on my head, my black hair fell down, the scent of gardenia flowers wafted out. The girl in the mirror had rosy lips and rosy cheeks, gentle and kind, like the bright moon. Perhaps in this lifetime, facing the mirror to groom myself, only this once. In the quiet of the night, suddenly the sound of broken porcelain rang out. I opened the door, saw Jin Yi An holding a jar of wine, sitting in front of the door, looking up at the moon. He seemed to not expect me to open the door, immediately stood up from the steps, took a step back in panic. Ning Ning, why are you out here? Jin Yi An's hair was disheveled, he seemed drunk. I picked up the jar of wine beside me, uncorked it. I have a few words, I want to tell you. Only then did Jin Yi An slowly sit down next to me. You say it. I have to go. Jin Yi An hugged the jar of wine without moving. After a long while he replied in a low voice, are you going back? I don't know. I took a sip of wine, the pungent liquid followed my throat, burning my internal organs. Barbarians causing chaos, a fight can last for many years. I know what you want to advise me. Jin Yi An chuckled, I won't take another woman as my wife. I'd rather you not know about this. The unnamed emotions I had at first gradually sealed away, and a rock pressed down on my heart, and I couldn't think of anything to say for a moment. Jin Yi An seemed to have tacitly admitted that he had made things difficult for me, and softly said, "Sorry. If you have someone you like, then..." "I already have someone I like." I suddenly opened my mouth, interrupting him. The night wind blew, blowing my black hair. Jin Yi An raised his eyes, saw my red eyes, was stunned, forced a smile. His tone was sour. "Brother Wen, how can things go as you wish? Yes, it's normal to love but not get what you want." I whispered softly, not knowing if I was talking to him or to myself. From afar came the sound of a whistle. It was a signal sent by my father's confidant. I raised my head and finished the last sip of wine, picked up my luggage, stood at the bottom of the steps, and said with a smile, "Then I'll go, take care." Tonight's farewell, half of my life was wasted. Jin Yi An was a bit drunk. "Yes, take care." I didn't turn my head. Suddenly, Jin Yi An spoke, "Brother Wen, you forgot something." When I turned back to get it, I found him absent-mindedly looking at the handkerchief in his hand. The tight string in my mind suddenly snapped. I quickly raised my hand to pull it back. Jin Yi An nimbly avoided it, squinting at the small embroidered words on the corner of the handkerchief, "Eldest daughter, Shi Ning." It was a gift that my mother had personally embroidered for me the year she passed away. I don't know how it fell out of my luggage. I felt a numb feeling from my heels to my neck. If my identity was revealed, it would be a crime against the king. My father had told me over and over again that if someone saw through my identity, they must be eliminated. I quickly grabbed it, but Tanian dodged. His eyes seemed to be burning with fire. I didn't say anything, and continued to struggle. Who would have thought that Jin Yi An would be so talented? After a few rounds, he wouldn't let me touch the hem of his shirt. "Jin Yi An, give it to me." His voice was dry. "Please trouble young master Wen to explain a bit. What is this?" "Sorry, it's a long story. I'll wait until later." "Later?" Jin Yi An laughed coldly. "We've been schoolmates for so many years. Don't we deserve a sincere word from you?" "I've said it. You and I, our paths are different." I pulled out my dagger. "I'm the pillar of the Ang family. This identity cannot be changed." Jin Yi An seemed to be angered. He didn't dodge. Instead he stepped forward and pressed his chest against the knife. "All right, Wen Shi Ning, you're very good. You want to kill someone to silence them, right? If you're so good, then stab me to death, and everything will end." I struggled for a while, still unable to escape. My wrist was tightly held by him, pressed against his chest a few more inches deeper. Angered by his fearless appearance, I frowned, and coldly said, "I am not like the young master, with a distinguished family background. The Wen family, from top to bottom, all rely on my father to support them. 100 years from now, it will be my turn to support the family. What do you want me to do? Be a weak and useless woman? My life was won by me from the pile of dead people. The only thing I have wronged you for is not valuing my status, and befriending you as a bosom friend. The mistake is all my fault. Wait until I return victorious. Listen to the young master's punishment." Jin Yi An's expression was extremely ugly. "I don't want to go in and punish you." "Then what does the young master want?" "My life?" I lowered my voice, cold as a knife. Tandian stuffed his handkerchief into his shirt 3 or 5 times. "If I had known earlier that you were a woman, what would I have been afraid of? I want you to repay me with your body." He angrily shouted the last sentence, making my head buzz. I immediately used both my hands and feet to push him away, staggered a few steps and stood firm, my mind in a mess. Impossible. Jin Yi An kicked away the rock under his feet. "Come here. Who said your life must be fought on the battlefield?" He gradually curled his lips, his eyes shining brightly. "You said you already have someone in your heart. I do too. You pursue yours, I pursue mine. We all rely on our own abilities." Seeing him step by step approaching, my mind was in a mess. What's going on with this? He seemed to have taken crazy medicine, laughing out loud. I took advantage of the opportunity, forcefully lifted my leg and kicked him in the knee. Damn it! Jin Yi An was in pain, bent down and knelt on the ground. I took the opportunity to lift my leg and run away. Suddenly, he grabbed the hem of my skirt, gritted his teeth and said, "Don't even think about running." In a hurry, I picked up the dagger and tore the hem of my shirt. Jin Yi An looked at the torn cloth in his hand and angrily shouted, "Wen Shi Ning, you dare to cut off our friendship." I didn't have time to explain to him and hurriedly left. From then on, we said
goodbye
and traveled 1,000 miles in one night. When the sun rose in the east, we had already passed several mountains. The capital had long since disappeared into the mountains. If we wanted to return, we didn't know what year or month it was. Under the green mountains, by the tea pavilion, I was absent-mindedly looking at the corner of my shirt that had been torn. The attendant called out to me a few times before I woke up. "Young master, your soul has been flying away since yesterday. Are you worried about the second young lady?" I softly said, paid for the tea, and got on my horse. The attendant looked at the sun. "Young master, one more day and we will reach Baiguan. We will soon meet the second young lady." That's right. Beyond the green mountains, there are thousands of miles of grasslands, and brutal, bloodthirsty enemies. My whole life is the sharp sword of the Liu dynasty blocking the north, unable to be a precious flower in the capital, unable to be a swallow in someone else's corridor. Baiguan is my heaven and earth. I put aside my thoughts, left behind a few coins of tea, and mounted my horse. The autumn wind blew, and the sky and earth in the north turned cold. I swung my whip and set off for the battlefield. Unexpectedly, 3 years had passed in the blink of an eye. 3 years later, a heavy snowfall fell from the sky. In the evening, the north wind blew the snow fiercely, blowing into the tent. Wen Shi Ning was so cold that he rubbed his hands, lifted the curtain, and muttered, "The barbarians also have to celebrate the new year. Recently they attacked several small towns, robbed chickens and ducks, and are not afraid of death. Brother, you haven't seen it, they relied on you to heal your wounds, and have already acted recklessly to the heavens." I lay on the bed, my eyes dimly looking up from the military book. I lost the battle, I can't blame others. Pfft. It's clearly the barbarian ringleader who played a trick. If it wasn't to save those old men, women, and children, you wouldn't have suffered a knife wound. As Yu Ning spoke, she picked up the charcoal tongs and stirred the stove. A smell of smoke quickly spread through the tent. I coughed a few times, feeling a dull pain below my chest again. This time the knife wound had stirred up an old wound, causing me to suffer quite a bit. "Yu Ning, help me see, it's bleeding." Bang! Yu Ning threw away the coal tongs, and walked over with an imposing manner. "Let me save you. You know how the Ming Yi Palace treated you. You must have a bad brain to save your 8th-generation relatives, leaving behind a disease that will tear at the slightest thing. What a sin!" I endured the pain and turned over to let Yu Ning take off the bandages. She didn't say anything for a while. I turned my head and found that her eyes were red. Finally, she was someone who had grown up under someone's protection, and her temperament was a bit arrogant. Yu Ning wiped her tears and began to treat my wound. The tent was silent, with only the cold wind whistling outside. "Brother, when will these days end?" She lowered her head and asked sadly, "The entire Liu dynasty has no one of use, do you need to take care of them?" Because of a defeat, they sent an envoy to patrol. The people in the capital all have some illnesses, and being pampered, it's hard to avoid finding fault. I closed my eyes, wanting to rest a bit. "I don't like them, just don't see them." "I won't see them, should I let you go?" She quickly finished treating my wound, helped me put my clothes back on, father is old, now you are the pillar of our Baekwan, nothing can happen. Okay, I know. Yu Ning left, and the tent darkened again. I frowned and drank the bitter medicine, wiped my mouth, and took out an envelope from under my pillow. The Imperial Court envoy will be arriving soon. He is an old friend of the young master. You must act with caution. My eyes fell on the two words old friend, and did not leave for a long time. That day, I was so angry that I severed our relationship and trampled on his heart. He must hate me to the bone, and when we met again, he would inevitably blame me even more. This was also the reason why I was not at ease to let Yu Ning receive me. After a few days of forced recuperation, when December came, the Imperial Court envoys had entered Baekwan. That day, I rode my horse to welcome them. From afar, I saw a group of people surrounding an ebony palanquin, vast from the ice and snow. The group of people stretched out, like an ink mark left between heaven and earth. My heart suddenly jumped. I gripped the reins tightly, and the wind blew my mouth and I coughed violently. Brother, your face has turned pale. Yu Ning glanced at me worriedly. Don't force me. I shook my head. It's fine. When the palanquin got closer, the servant in front jumped off the horse, clasped his hands and said, "The Lord is tired from the journey, please arrange a comfortable place for him to stay." Yu Ning's eyes were most disgusted by this appearance of living in luxury. She frowned. The north is cold, it's the same everywhere. The servant didn't even bother to look up. Then stay at the general's mansion. Sir. I raised my hand to stop him, and slowly said, "Please enter the city, Lord." There was no movement inside the carriage. The attendant still stood in front of the carriage, and said coldly, "Please dismount, Lord." Yu Ning immediately became angry. He has been seriously injured and hasn't recovered yet. Being able to come here is already giving you face, Lord. The north is an important region of the Liu dynasty. If there are no special circumstances, there is no need to dismount to salute. Why can't it be your lord's turn? The attendant was stunned, and after a while, he smiled faintly. Exemption from formalities is a favor, not exempting formalities is a duty. I was about to get off the horse, when suddenly a gentle voice came from the carriage. Forget it, no need to make a big deal out of it. After 3 years, I could still recognize Jin Yi An's voice even with my eyes closed. It's just that this voice no longer had the warmth of the past, it was cold and icy. I turned the horse's head, leading the way. Yu Ning walked beside me, muttering, "I didn't hear wrong just now, that was." Yes. Did he take the wrong medicine? How did it turn out like this? I ignored Yu Ning's questioning tone and warned her, "He's holding an important position now, be careful with your words." Perhaps hearing the severity in my voice, Yu Ning stuck out her tongue and fell silent. I rarely stayed in the general's mansion. The mansion was usually empty, with only a few old servants remaining. Yu Ning helped me get off the horse. The carriage gradually stopped in front of the door. A hand reached out from the curtain, long and slender fingers, clearly proportioned. The wind and snow seemed unable to wait, suddenly blowing the curtains open. A handsome face appeared before my eyes, elegant and noble. The peach blossom eyes were no different from 3 years ago, only a little colder and more distant, making people unable to look away. He was wearing a long black fox fur coat. His skin was as white as snow, his eyes were clearly black and white, his pupils moved, and stopped on me. Jin Yi An stepped out of the carriage, coldly curling his lips. "Little General Wen, long time no see." I said formally, "Please enter the mansion." Jin Yi An pulled the corner of his mouth, brushed off the snow on his shoulder, walked past me, and stopped. "Are you injured?" "It's not a big wound, I'll trouble you to worry." Jin Yi An let out a soft humph and lifted his foot to enter the mansion. The attendant brushed off the dust, frowning and complaining, "Is this really the general's mansion?" Yu Ning squeezed past him, helping me enter. "If you like to stay, then stay, what a mess." The attendant was about to say something. Jin Yi An spoke up, "Shu, you've talked too much." The attendant immediately shut up, bowing and following behind. Now the mansion had not been renovated for many years, only the main courtyard was livable. Jin Yi An crossed the withered grass, pushed open the door of a room himself and entered. Yu Ning opened her mouth to say something, but I stopped her. "There's a banquet tonight, please come." I paused for a moment, seeing no movement inside. I continued, "There's a performance by Hu Ji." A loud boom was heard from inside. The door was pushed open, revealing Jin Yi An's cold face. "Thank you for your kindness, General." After saying that, the door closed with a bang. Yu Ning was hit with a nose full of dust and rubbed her nose in confusion. "Brother, why do I feel like he doesn't have a good temper?" "A good temper would be strange. He used to like to anger others. It seems that year, I really made him angry." I secretly smiled and ignored him. The night in the north usually gets dark early. The wind-welcoming party is not held in the general's residence, but in the military tent. The campfire flares up, lighting up the night sky, the blazing fire roasting fresh beef and lamb. The Hu music plays, the silver bells jingle. Jin Yi An arrives as promised, changing into a more noble fox fur coat, sitting in the main seat, drinking with my father. During Hu Ji's dance, her gentle eyes often sweep towards Jin Yi An. Yu Ning nibbles on a leg of lamb, leaning over to mumble, "Brother, why is he dressed like a peacock? He's beautiful, but all these big shots, I wonder who he's showing off to." I smile, take a sip of the osmanthus wine brought from the capital. The sweetness quickly spreads on the tip of my tongue. In the end, only the spicy and bitter taste of the wine remains. 3 weeks have passed. Jin Yi An is interested, leaning on the table, his face flushed, smiling and asking, "Brother Wen, after so many years apart, do you have someone in your heart?" Seeing me being called, everyone suddenly became interested, and leaned in to listen. I slowly finished a cup of osmanthus wine, closed my eyes to feel the warmth rising from the rim of my ears, and shook my head, "Not yet." Jin Yi An looked at me for a long time, then suddenly turned around and raised his glass to my father-in-law. "Hey! You're drunk, our two families no longer have this marriage, don't dare to talk nonsense," my father solemnly reminded me. Jin Yi An propped his chin up and smiled. "There are broken mirrors that can be mended, have you ever heard of it, father-in-law?" My father's face turned pale, his mustache trembled, as if he would immediately stand up and hit him. The leg of lamb in Yu Ning's hand fell to the ground. "What the hell? He's letting me see it? Is he crazy?" At the crucial moment, I filled a cup of wine, stood up in a daze, and walked towards Jin Yi An. At this moment, Jin Yi An's eyes didn't move at all, his pitch-black eyes locked onto me. I came to the table, the wine cup gently touched his glass. "Little sister has offended many times, I hope you will be generous and forgive me." Jin Yi An narrowed his eyes. "What if I say that the person who offended me was someone else?" I held the wine cup, remained silent for a long time, and drank it all in one gulp. "It's up to the Lord to decide." Jin Yi An coldly snorted, "General, you should remember this sentence." After the banquet, Jin Yi An no longer made things difficult. Late at night, the banquet ended, and everyone left one by one. I drank a lot of wine, my steps were empty, and I leaned on Yu Ning to go out. Because I had to take the carriage back to the general's residence, I stopped by the side of the road to meet Jin Yi An. I secretly thought that something was wrong, and signaled Yu Ning to wait for a while before continuing on. Who would have thought that Jin Yi An had sharp eyes, and staggered over, greeting me, "Little General Wen, are you going back to the residence?" The scene before my eyes was shaking. I lowered my head and brows, trying to calm my voice. "Yes. Let's go together." "No trouble, Lord." As soon as I finished speaking, Yu Ning struggled to get up, panting, her face flushed. Jin Yi An seemed to understand, glanced at her a few times. I immediately pulled Yu Ning behind, blocking Jin Yi An's sight. He sneered unhappily, mocking, "Brother Wen really values you like a precious jade." I staggered and lowered my head. "Farewell, sir." Jin Yi An was stunned, turned around. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly turned back, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me forward. Under the influence of the osmanthus wine, I was already slightly drunk, my mind was hazy. How could I bear his pull? I instantly fell forward. Plop. Our clothes touched, rubbing together, making a dull sound. Jin Yi An had already turned around, hugging me tightly in his arms, his mouth constantly scolding, "Brother Wen, have you drunk too much? Why do you keep stabbing my heart?" The light in front of my eyes flickered. I only heard Jin Yi An's voice. At this moment, an indescribable feeling spread throughout my body. I gently leaned my forehead on his shoulder. The alcohol seeped into my head. I could no longer move. "You drank quite a bit, and you have injuries. Be gentle," Yu Ning reminded me softly. Jin Yi An was silent for a long time, then suddenly hugged me. "If you can't drink, why are you so forceful?" After saying that, he stuffed me into the carriage, and followed closely behind. "Yu Ning, you won't get lost." Jin Yi An pressed my hand down when I tried to lift the curtain. The carriage immediately moved. This position made my wound ache. I couldn't help but groan, curled up into a ball. Jin Yi An sat down beside me, gently lifted my chin, and brushed my hair away. "Does it hurt?" I gasped a few times, trying to suppress the surging feeling in my stomach, gently shaking my head. "It doesn't hurt. Your face is so pale, how can it not hurt?" After a while of rummaging, he brought water to my lips. "Drink some water." I suddenly grabbed his hand, carefully placed it on my face, feeling the warmth, not saying anything for a long time. "Brother Jin." "Yes." I pulled a corner of the cloak, stuffed it into his hand. "Take it." Jin Yi An didn't move for a long time. "You cut it off yourself before, now you want me to hold it back myself. Wen Shi Ning, what kind of reasoning is this?" I grabbed the corner of the cloak. In that moment, I felt very sad. 3 years, for me, were days and nights facing life and death. For him, he had already experienced a life of wealth and comfort. Perhaps he already had someone in his heart. What could I rely on? The carriage was still moving forward. Jin Yi An sat there talking to me. "The person you like, is he in the north?" I hesitated for a while, closed my eyes and nodded. "Are you two together?" I slowly shook my head, heard him laugh contemptuously. "I thought you were so capable. 3 years, you couldn't even pursue a man." These words made me feel wronged, pushed his hand holding the water away, moved to the side, and frowned in pain because he touched the wound. Bang! Jin Yi An threw the cup aside, frowning angrily. "What are you moving for?" He grabbed my wrist, stopping me from running away, asking the coachman outside, "How long until we arrive?" "Sir, it's right ahead." "Let me go." I spoke through my nose, struggling restlessly for a while. Jin Yi An, on the contrary, tightened his grip, speaking unhurriedly and slowly. "Keep making trouble, angering me, then I will marry your sister." This sentence easily grasped my weakness. I immediately softened in Jin Yi An's arms, not saying another word. When getting out of the carriage, the attendant hesitated a bit. "Master, go get some medicinal wine." "Yes." I put one hand around Jin Yi An's neck, opened my eyes slightly, looked at the starry sky, surprisingly bright, as if returning to 3 years ago. He and I were also this close. "You've lost a lot of weight. How have you been these past 3 years?" Jin Yi An supported me for a while. I replied with a few simple sentences, too lazy to explain to him. The northern pass had been short of food for a long time, and had relied entirely on the help of the surrounding people to continue the war. Eating less would naturally make you lose weight. "Where is the room?" He stood in the courtyard, waiting for me to speak. I tilted my head, carefully recognized it, and pointed not far away. "There. That place is mine." "It's mine." Jin Yi An laughed angrily. "Okay. Yours." He kicked open the door, and put me on the small bed in the room. Just then, Shu brought medicinal wine. He took it and closed the door. In the room, there was only the moonlight shining through the crack of the door, gently shining down. He knelt by the bed, gently squeezing my thin shoulders, and sighed, "Wen Shi Ning, do you want me to personally serve you? It didn't count before, but now you don't see me in your eyes." "I see." I hadn't sobered up yet, and muttered a few words, reluctantly opening my eyes, searching for Jin Yi An's faint figure. He didn't move, stiff in front of the bed. I was afraid he wouldn't hear clearly, so I added another sentence, "I saw it." "I saw it, but it won't help you." He stuffed the medicinal wine into my hand, stood up, and glanced at me coldly. "Take me out for a walk tomorrow. I'll sleep in the next room tonight. You should rest early." Seeing him strut out the door, the words I wanted to hold back got stuck in my throat, and in the end I didn't say them. I covered my eyes, and after a long while, I laughed at myself, tightly holding the porcelain vase that still had some warmth. Perhaps he only pitied me, just like he treated stray cats and stray dogs. Early the next morning, Jin Yi An wanted me to take him to the flower shop. Today he had changed into a new set of clothes. In this gloomy winter, he was especially outstanding. Before leaving, he smiled faintly and said, "Where is the person you like? Call them, I will help you investigate the truth." I took a step back, lowered my eyelids. "Thank you, sir, the military orders are strict. I dare not violate them." Jin Yi An waved his hand. "I have already informed your father. Patrolling under orders does not count." I did not go to such places. This matter was left to another old general to take full responsibility. All along the way, I followed behind, my expression indifferent as I listened to his enthusiastic introductions. "The Nihong courtyard has a new beauty, not bad in appearance. The Chunfeng courtyard has a new dancer, graceful in figure. The Linglong ward has a singer, with a gentle voice." Jin Yi An immediately followed, and after leaving, she complained in all sorts of ways. Her limbs are too small, like bamboo sticks. She's not fed every day, and her legs can't support her body. She has a weak temperament and likes to cry. It's annoying to hear. The innkeeper usually forced a smile. "My lord, these are all the beauties with the slimmest waists in our building. You can't even find them in the capital. What type do you like in the end?" Jin Yi An glanced over, and glanced at me indifferently. "She has to have a strong personality." The innkeeper's smile stiffened, and after a long while, her eyes lit up, and she gently patted Jin Yi An's shoulder with a fragrant towel. "Like a spoiled demon, I hate it. If you like this slave, just say it directly. Why do you have to beat around the bush?" Jin Yi An held the demon that was pouncing on him and pushed him away with one hand, his forehead bulging with veins. "Get out." She turned her head and asked me, "Does General Wen like anyone?" I lowered my head and said slowly, "They're all not bad. I'll bring them to the Lord's mansion another day." Jin Yi An looked at me for a long time, his eyebrows rarely furrowing. "If I want to get married, it must be 8 large sedan chairs, a formal marriage, not some concubine who can't show her face." He suddenly became serious, making me stunned, not knowing how to respond, so I said, "That's right, finding a wife in a brothel is not a good way." The old general seemed to realize that the atmosphere was a bit tense, so he smiled. "For a man, having a few beauties is normal." Jin Yi An smiled faintly and replied, "A few beauties, I really didn't know this colleague had such an elegant taste." The old general was startled, realizing that this was the court official from the capital, and quickly apologized. "Sir, you've said too much, this humble general has never." Jin Yi An gently waved his robe, sat down. "All right, I'll spare you this once, call the most beautiful person out here." The old general hurriedly left, leaving only Jin Yi An and me in the room. He gently tapped the table, looked around, and said with a smile, "Everyone said the military camp was poor, but it turns out that all the money is flowing here." I suddenly realized that I hadn't officially sat down to chat with Jin Yi An this time, and I didn't know what his purpose was. "You As soon as I said a word, the door was pushed open, and a female singer holding a pipa gracefully walked in. Jin Yi An seemed to suddenly become interested, and all attention was drawn over there. The female singer bowed, sat down not far away, and gently played the lute and sang. Jin Yi An drank his wine lightly, leaning close to me. Look at that pipa, it's definitely not an ordinary thing. If we can find out who's behind it, it'll be enough for you guys to eat for a few years. How could I not know about their dirty business, but their secret relationship was complicated and intertwined, and just a little bit would affect the whole situation. The war in the north was tense, and it couldn't be easily touched. On this side, he and I were chatting, while on the other side, the dancers were happily singing and playing music, calling a group of young girls to dance, and then enthusiastically offering drinks. Jin Yi An was surrounded by many beauties, hugging each other, and was soon completely drunk. I knew he wanted to show off, but when he stood up, seeing him walk unsteadily, his entire weight pressing on me, it turned out he was really drunk. Shu standing by the carriage saw this, hurriedly supported him. I followed closely behind, one hand helping Jin Yi An, the other hand carrying my clothes onto the carriage. As soon as we entered, Tan Yan lost his balance. Thud, he fell onto the soft mattress, not forgetting to pull my neck down with him. He fell with all four legs up in the air, propping himself up with his elbows. I kept the prone dog position, lying on top of him, my arms and legs supporting Tan Yan on both sides. The two of us only pulled apart a short distance. The strong aroma of wine and heat spread in the darkness. Tan Yan's eyes sparkled. Because of the awkward position, his collar was loose, his neck, Adam's apple and collarbone were exposed, like a popular painting in the streets, depicting the elegance of a noble young master. Madam. His affectionate and ambiguous tone immediately shattered my reason. Wife. He called out again in a daze, his fingertips lightly touching my ear, as if recalling something. My heart was pounding, mixed with a bit of sharp pain, trembling non-stop. Jin Yi An held me, pulling me into his embrace. Do you still want to be good to me? This sentence hit the door of my heart hard. In that moment, the lock in my mind almost fell off. An old handkerchief fell out from my chest, the hem was frayed. It was indeed mine. My heart ached even more. In this life I could only be General Wen. I couldn't make promises to anyone. Bang! I used one hand to cover his mouth, interrupted him, used force to push him away, and coldly said, "Sir, respect yourself." Jin Yi An was rejected by me, quietly looked at me for a long time, suddenly grabbed my chin and kissed me hard. The old wine from my lips and teeth spread an intoxicating fragrance. I trembled, frozen in place, my mind blank. This was the first time someone disrespected me like this, but I didn't feel embarrassed at all, just stood there, obediently letting him play with me. Suddenly someone pulled the curtain behind me. "Sir." The old general's voice suddenly stopped. Jin Yi An took the opportunity to coldly glance at him. "Get out." I heard him roll away, nervously grabbing Jin Yi An's sleeve, my heart sinking to rock bottom. It's over, they know. My hidden thoughts that I couldn't bear were finally known by everyone. After Jin Yi An vented his anger, he let me go, slowly caressed my back, and returned to the topic. "No self-respect. How do you plan to deal with me?" A wave of shame flared up inside me, and with a thud, I stood up. How dare he do this? Shameless. I have nothing to do with you, sir. Jin Yi An raised his eyebrows. He saw it. Do you really not care about worldly eyes? If she wants to hide under this man's shell for the rest of her life, I don't care. I felt like I fell into an ice hole. Despair flooded over me, finally filling me. He is like a cool breeze and a clear moon. Why does he have to cling to me? Please let me go. I couldn't hear what I said, almost paralyzed. I made strange sounds, my voice stopped, my heart felt like it was breaking, pulling my internal organs along with it. Jin Yi An's hazy eyes gradually became clear. He stared at me. For a long time, he laughed bitterly at himself. I knew it. He fixed his coat, sat up, his eyes clear. Wen Shi Ning, this is the last time. If you don't need me, I won't bother you anymore. The stars were bright tonight. I staggered back to the mansion, tripping several times along the way. The light in Yuning's room was still on. Hearing the sound of the door opening, she came out just in time to support me as I was staggering, bent down to brush the dust off my clothes. Did you fall into the ditch? I shook my head, laughing heartily. We went to drink flower wine, and fell several times. Yuning's expression was complicated. Lord Jin was also there? I nodded, leaning on Yuning's shoulder. Yes, he really likes women. Yuning didn't understand. He is a man of strong blood. Shouldn't he like women? I hugged her, smiling. Yes, he should. Yuning supported me with difficulty, muttering, "Are you crazy? You've never touched a drop of alcohol before. Ever since he came, you've been drinking every day." Tonight, because of the alcohol, I fell asleep early. In the morning, as usual, I went to the martial arts training ground to practice. On the way, many people looked at me with strange eyes. Yuning went to listen for a while, and when she returned, her face was red with anger. "Brother, they are bad-mouthing you." I looked straight ahead, holding my spear tightly. Okay. Okay? Their mouths are theirs, I can't control them. Without needing to listen, I could guess, it was just that Jin Yi An and I were being ambiguous, embarrassing Bei Guan. "So what's going on with you two?" Yuning pulled my sleeve, lowering her voice. "Are you really with him?" Yuning. I rarely spoke seriously to Yuning. In this life, my family is all I have. I can't fall down. No matter what happens. Halfway through my sentence, I sighed. We're about to go to battle. Concentrate. If anyone's skin itches, don't be considerate. With my prestige in the army, it wouldn't be to the point where I would be crushed by baseless rumors to the point of not being able to recover. The days passed quickly until the end of December. Jin Yi An's side was quiet. The battle became more and more tense. You came and I retreated for half a month. The two generals fought no less than 10 times, each time blood was shed. That day, I rode back to the mansion, and ran into Jin Yi An, who was preparing to leave. He glanced at my shoulder that was stained red with blood. His lips moved, but in the end he didn't say anything. He looked away, and quickly walked away. The old servant in the mansion hurriedly came out to lead the horse. I got off the horse, wiped my cold sweat. "Prepare hot water. Don't tell second young lady and father about this." The wound had not yet healed. It was stabbed by the enemy general today, and it immediately split open. Now, just moving a little bit was excruciating pain. In order to prevent people in the military camp from seeing me, I rode back to the mansion late at night, but unfortunately I was caught by Jin Yi An. I turned my back to the window, sat next to the charcoal stove, and took off my outer garment. The blood had long dried, stuck to the flesh, and I could only grit my teeth and tear it off. I tore a few inches, then put my head on the pillow, panting, enduring the excruciating pain. Suddenly, I was on guard against someone pushing the door open, and before I could pull up my shirt, Jin Yi An rushed in with a cold wind. "You." Jin Yi An's face was gloomy, his big hand tightly grasping the arm that was pulling my shirt. I couldn't pull away, so I could only turn red in the ears, as if I was being punished, being forced to expose all my wounds in front of him. "Don't look." I was in so much pain that my voice was hoarse, and my eyes were also red. Jin Yi An not only didn't listen, but instead tied my hands behind me, busily doing something, and finally sat behind me, leaning over, his voice cold. "Bite your teeth and endure." After he finished speaking, he didn't know what to apply on the wound and the bloody part of my shirt. The cold medicinal scent made me relax a bit. Then, the shirt was slowly taken off by him, revealing the horrifying wound. Between women and men, there is inherently a difference. Jin Yi An's voice was cold. "I don't want to see you continue like this." I felt his fingertips soaked in medicine, applying it to my wound, gently and carefully, a soft sweetness rising in my heart. Bei Guan must belong to the Wen family. If I give up, those people will push us into the abyss. That's why you chose him. Jin Yi An still didn't stop. Him? The person you like, the man who can help you make a name for yourself. I silently clenched my clothes, not saying a word. Actually, I'm very curious, what exactly is better about him? Jin Yi An didn't intend to let me go. I took a deep breath. You're very good, no need to compare yourself to others. Jin Yi An laughed at himself. I don't know how to fight, I just watched you, a woman rushing into battle, covered in injuries. The battlefield is merciless with swords and blades, and I couldn't protect you. Is this considered good? I tapped the armor beside me, laughing, but this armor is very good. Compared to the patched-up stuff before winter, it was already countless times better. If it weren't for Jin Yi An's concern for arrangements, the casualties would have been very heavy. Jin Yi An said, I can do, that's all. If I don't see you, I'll tell them to live well and protect you for me. The charcoal crackled, casting 2 overlapping shadows on the wall. During these days with no end in sight, it seemed that it wasn't too difficult to get through. I'll be back soon. Jin Yi An suddenly spoke, there are some things that you can't do, only I can do. I knew he had gone to the capital to impeach the officials of Bei Guan. It was just that this task of offending someone else, how did it fall on Jin Yi An's head? Jin Yi An helped me roll up my clothes. I spent 3 years, clearing away all the obstacles for you. It was not in vain that I liked you for a while. I wish you to soon become a marquis or general, and to achieve great success. His eyes, suppressed and burning, finally became calm. In this moment, he completely let go. 11 after Jin Yi An left, I sat silently in front of the window, unable to sleep all night. When the sky was bright, an 800-mile express letter arrived from the south. I opened it and saw the Emperor's secret order, make you the Marquis of Xinbei, pacify the northern barbarians within a month, and grant you a Danshu Taekwon asterisk, allowing you to act as you please, and mobilize the troops and horses of the 3 states. Asterisk, the meaning of the Danshu Taekwon is similar to this death exemption gold card. Whoever is granted it will naturally receive the supreme protection of the Emperor. It is said that in the past few months, the wars in the east have gradually become more frequent, and now the imperial courts of all 8 directions are enemies, and a victory is urgent. The North Pass is the first play for the Emperor to kill the chicken to scare the monkeys. I swiped my finger a few times on the Danshu Taekwon, and did not move for a long time. The Emperor was willing to spend a lot, to make you a prince, grant a death exemption card, and even give me the power to command the troops and horses of the 3 states, which means he is handing it over to me. It was a battle on the mountain pass. We could only win, not lose. But to pacify the northern barbarians, it was not as easy as turning one's hand, this time going, 9 parts death and 1 part life. Not allowing myself to hesitate, the light of dawn broke. I put on my armor again, locked the small door. When I turned around, I saw Shu standing at the door, waiting for me for a long time, his shoulders wet with dew. Little General Wen. Shu respectfully bowed. Shu has a few words, I cannot help but say them. I stopped, silently waiting for him to continue. He looked at me, finally unable to bear it. My master clearly has a better place to go, yet he took on this difficult task for you. Right now the Ming Yi Prince's mansion has to endure a lot of rumors. If the general doesn't even say a word of thanks, that's fine, but please don't torment my master. So that's how it is. Sorry, I never knew. He didn't say, of course you don't know. There are so many young ladies in the capital waiting to get married, but they didn't catch my master's eye, and only ran to Bei Guan to ask for the Wen family's daughter's hand in marriage. If the general still has a conscience. My heart was pounding. Faster and faster. In the distance, the sound of war drums suddenly sounded. The Bei man had made their move. I looked up to the north. The crescent moon had not yet set, but the sun had already risen from the east. An indescribable urge surged in my chest, tearing the wound, pouring out. "Shu sure, there is this sentence, I can only tell you." I looked straight at him. "This time, I'm going to war, I probably won't come back. If your master doesn't marry someone else, please tell him, the person I love, is only him. I use my life to protect the world, just so he can live a peaceful life, with many children and grandchildren. Wen Shi Ning's fate is short, his fortune is thin, he's dead, forget it then forget it." After saying that, I walked around Shu Shi's face full of surprise, went out and got on my horse. In the distance, the sound of a horn urged me on, and snow began to fall in the sky. I looked back at the ruined courtyard one last time, swung my horsewhip with a sharp sound, and charged towards the gloomy northern horizon. Half a month later. The heavy snowfall for many days had blocked the last road of Xushan. Thousands of soldiers lay in wait in the snow and ice, and the number of soldiers who were blinded by the snow was increasing. But the series of consecutive victories had greatly increased the morale of the army. "General, the heavy snow has sealed the mountain, can the barbarians come?" I lay in the snow, quietly observing the mountain road below. This was the vital point of the barbarians' food supply. As humans we had to eat, we would definitely wait. Father and Yu Ning were guarding the east. I led people to guard the mountain gate. As long as the food supply was cut off, our troops on the other 3 roads would break through bamboo and enter deep into the northern barbarians, straight to the royal court. Therefore, this battle was the most dangerous, and also the most important. At night, the wind was as cold as a knife. I looked at the pitch-black sky. The words of that night appeared in my mind. I clenched the military talisman in my hand. A trace of warmth rose in my heart. Finally, a spark appeared on the mountain peak. The general beside him was about to stand up, when I suddenly stopped him. "The mountain road is difficult to travel at night. Why did you choose this time to transport food?" There were many suspicious points hidden in his words. Seeing the fire growing, the generals and soldiers couldn't hold back. "General, if we don't fight, they will leave the valley." I stared at the flames, when suddenly, the row of lights suddenly stopped. I suddenly had a bad feeling. That's not right. Their main force has already moved to Dong Lok. Retreat. At this time, from Donglu Mountain came the sound of fierce fighting. A sharp arrow tore through the air. I promptly pulled a soldier beside me to the back, avoiding his instant death. Tens of thousands of northern barbarians emerged from the mountains and forests. We were immediately like fish in a bowl, forced to fight. The battle immediately became chaotic. We relied on our experience, barely withstanding the northern barbarians' deadly battle. This battle was extremely fierce. We blocked 9/10 of the attack on Donglu. The brothers beside us, some died, some were injured. I held a long spear. Step by step through the rugged forest, the enemy behind me relentlessly pursued. "Behead Wen Shi Ning, the king will reward you." The voice spread far and wide. I stabbed a barbarian in front of me to death, stepped on his corpse, gritted my teeth and continued walking. The footsteps behind me became more and more frequent. My eyes darkened, my steps were illusory. I knew I was exhausted, but my heart was extremely calm. Father and Yu Ning must have blocked the food supply. Tomorrow the 3-way army will destroy their fragile armor, and march straight to the royal court. Dying alone is not a loss. I walked to a cliff, raised my head and saw the moon. Clear and pure. The forest wind rustled, blowing my hair. I remembered the proud and radiant image I had from the far south, but in this life, I probably would never see it again. Fortunately, I had already said the words in my heart. I smiled, spread my arms, and gently fell into the ravine. In a flash, a heart-wrenching scream rang out from behind me. "Wen Shi Ning!" That voice was filled with fear, tearing apart the dark space, like a sharp arrow piercing my heart. I opened my eyes in shock, wanting to turn back to look, but it was too late, my body like a butterfly's wings, falling into the abyss. In the last moment before losing consciousness, I seemed to feel someone holding my hand. but perhaps it was just a hallucination before death. People say that before you die, you will see the lights and flowers forever, but I didn't. I closed my eyes, my whole body felt like someone had broken my bones, the pain was unbearable. I couldn't help but let out a groan. Consciousness immediately returned. I heard someone gently asking beside my ear, "Ning Ning, where does it hurt?" I slowly opened my eyes. Above me was a broken dry branch. Jin Yi An's clothes were in tatters, his face was covered in blood stains. For a moment, I thought I was dead. Slowly blinking, I finally saw him clearly, moved my arm, realized that I had broken my ribs, could only lie still, asked, "Why did you come?" Jin Yi An lifted my face. After confirming that I was still alive, he collapsed to the ground, raised his head to look at the moon, and burst out laughing. At this moment, the mountain wind also became gentle. The leaves rustled, gently pleasing to the ear. I weakly curled the corner of my lips. Jin Yi An laughed enough, got up, and carried me on his back. "Do you know where the reinforcements are?" I leaned on his shoulder. "I don't know, I can't tell the direction." "The moon is there." He pointed for me to see. I pondered for a while. "Go forward. Hold on to me, if you can get out alive this time, you owe me your life." Jin Yi An followed the direction I pointed, and slowly walked forward. "Okay." Very quickly, I noticed that his steps were unusual, he was limping. "How's your leg?" Jin Yi An's breathing was chaotic, he said in a low voice, "Sprained ankle, not serious." I knew how high the ravine was. Jumping down meant he had no intention of living, only leaving behind a skeleton, not falling into enemy hands. If it weren't for the dense forest blocking the sunlight, I would have lost my life. Jin Yi An really didn't think and jumped down after him. I asked, "Aren't you afraid of dying?" He stopped, helped me up a bit, and continued walking. "It's just dying for love, what's so difficult?" He was crazy. I hugged his neck tightly, my eyes red. Perhaps he already knew, walking for a long time, gathering enough strength before slowly saying, "Luckily Xu sure is smart, otherwise how long are you going to hide it from me?" "Probably, until death." "It's not easy to get her to open her mouth." Jin Yi An snorted, suddenly stopped, and said, "There's no more way ahead." In front of us was a dense forest of thorns, blocking the exit. When dawn came, the pursuers would catch up. Right now the only way was to clear a path through the thorns. I gritted my teeth and said, "Put me down." "What are you going to do?" "Cut it out." Jin Yi An put me on the ground, took out the dagger from his sleeve, and said, "Let me cut it." The thorns were so dense that I didn't know where to start. If I just reached in, I would soon be pricked by the thorns and turn into a porcupine. Jin Yi An's skin that had been used to being nourished was now covered in scratches and wounds from the sharp rocks. He still acted as if nothing happened, grabbed a thorn bush and quickly swung his knife. I leaned against the tree trunk and stood up. "Let me." Jin Yi An wiped the blood off his face, not turning around. "Sit down, don't cause me any more trouble." I really had no strength left, so I leaned against the tree trunk and knelt down, trying to rest my head on the rock to regain my strength. Suddenly, I heard a very small vibration. My instinct of vigilance that had been trained for many years on the battlefield made me immediately open my eyes, grit my teeth, and struggle to stand up, staggering into the thorn bush. The sharp thorns immediately pierced my flesh. Without any support, I could only hold on to the thorns and slowly move forward. The thorn bushes along the path were covered in blood. "Tan Dian." My voice was hoarse, only the rustling of the wind could be heard in front. Suddenly, I turned a corner, and saw Jin Yi An quietly leaning against a thorn bush, blood dripping from his fingertips onto the ground. He heard the noise, startled, opened his eyes, stood up straight, and frowned when he saw me, asking, "What are you doing here?" "There's someone behind, can't wait any longer." When I got closer, I discovered that Jin Yi An's clothes were covered in blood. It was clear that he had been injured since he fell. Feeling my gaze, Jin Yi An pulled his collar tight, bent down. "Come here." How could his physical strength withstand another person? I grabbed his hand, picked up the dagger, and used force to chop. 2 people working together was still better than 1. When clear footsteps sounded from behind, the thorn bush was finally broken into a corner. The bright moonlight shone down, and my heart sank. Under the moonlight, there was an endless stretch of dry sandbar. If we escape, facing the pursuers, we will have nowhere to hide. Jin Yi An tugged on my sleeve. I saw under the cliff not far away, there was a narrow hole, enough to hold 2 people. Jin Yi An stuffed me in first, then crawled in himself, conveniently pulling a rock to cover the outside. In the narrow space, we stuck together. I was below, he supported above. Because of the small space, I was forced to wrap my arms around his neck. "If they discover us, I will stop them, you run," I softly instructed. "Am I a person who is afraid of death?" Jin Yi An panted, exhausted. "Want to go back together, want to die together." After saying that, he hugged me tighter. "Don't be afraid, when we reach hell, I will open the way for you." Outside, the footsteps of the pursuers were clearly in my ears. I didn't dare to breathe heavily. They searched for a while, then cursed and walked away. Only when the footsteps completely disappeared did I breathe a sigh of relief. They're gone. At this moment, the weight on my body suddenly increased. Jin Yi An fell limply on top of me, no longer moving. "Jin Yi An." I called out, but he didn't respond. My heart was tense. In the darkness I couldn't see my 5 fingers. I groped his neck, feeling the weak pulse under his skin, then I breathed a sigh of relief. Then, I tried to push the rock above my head away. Inching forward, the clear moonlight shone in. I saw his face was bloodless, and his lips were tightly pressed together. I used all my strength to pull him out, lying under the night sky, adjusting my breathing. When I regained my strength, I struggled to sit up, patting Jin Yi An's face. His breathing was weaker than before. "Jin Yi An." I pushed him, but he still didn't move. "Jin Yi An." My voice trembled even more. "Jin Yi An." I cried and called again. Finally, he let out a soft groan, vaguely calling, "Ning Ning." He slowly moved his hand, using his fingers to hook me. "Don't cry. I will protect you, I won't go anywhere." I felt relieved, lying down on the ground, holding his hand with both hands, resting my head on his palm, crying silently. "Ning Ning." Jin Yi An's voice was weak. "You go first, come back and wait for me, I will rest for a bit." I was like grasping a life-saving straw, shaking my head. "Don't follow me to die for love." Jin Yi An pushed me. "Go." His voice became smaller and smaller. I trembled and hugged him, saying in his ear, "I've liked you for many years, I don't want to go." I didn't know if Jin Yi An heard it. He stopped talking. I slowly curled up next to him, holding his cold hand tightly. I had a very long dream. In the dream, Jin Yi An and I were still studying in the academy. That day, he was punished. When he was being beaten, many students opened the window, in name to read books, but in reality, to watch Jin Yi An being laughed at. I sat by the window and listened, the sound of the whip whistling in the air, truly without mercy. After 20 lashes, Jin Yi An walked in, turned his back to me, tore his shirt in half, revealing his muscular back full of whip marks. The light shone through the sweat, breaking into golden leaves, and there was fresh blood stimulating the eyeballs, so lifelike. The military book fell onto the chessboard. I kept holding the book, stunned on the spot. "I was beaten because of you. Is it too much for you to apply medicine on me?" he said sadly. That was the first time I was captivated by the bright smile of a young man. From then on, it was engraved in my ears, becoming my distant dream. "Ning Ning, what do you want to do in the future?" "I want to be a general. Then I will be a powerful minister, cleaning up the court, so you don't have to worry. The scene changed. Jin Yi An sat by the window, smiling at me. Ning Ning, I seem to like someone. I was silent for a long time, pursed my lips and asked, which woman? Jin Yi An scratched his head. Forget it, let's not talk anymore. Today we went to the brothel. Who do you like? All good. I lowered my head, indifferently answering. Is that so? Only then did I finally see clearly how careful Jin Yi An was at that time. And my answers to pretend to be a man had gradually extinguished Jin Yi An's hopes. He didn't like brothels, and I didn't like them either, but in the trials and evasions, our intentions were covered by layers of barriers, and in the end, we gradually drifted apart. Brother. Someone called out to me from afar. My whole body felt heavy. I wanted to answer but couldn't utter a word. Brother. This time the sound was a little clearer, and I realized it was Yu Ning, who was right beside me, her hands unconsciously waving around. Hurry! He's awake! A sudden, joyful, urgent call pulled me back, and I opened my eyes, staring at the familiar face above me. I was stunned for a moment, and gradually realized that I was still alive. The next moment, I sat up. Where's Jin Yi An? The voice was hoarse and hard to hear. Fortunately they still understood. Yu Ning held my hand tightly, her eyes red like a rabbit. Still alive, don't worry. However, not seeing him for a second, I couldn't feel at ease, pushed him away and ran straight out. At the tent door, suddenly rushed into a warm embrace. Under the cold, damp clothes was a hot body temperature, as if full of life. He hugged me tightly, closed the curtain, blocked the wind and snow, patted my back, and said softly, "Don't be afraid, we're all still alive." I had just woken up, my mind was still in a state of panic, instinctively hugged him tightly, not saying a word. He carried me back to bed, said, "Everyone go out, I will take care of her." Only these words truly made me feel at ease. Everyone left. I didn't move, resolutely refused to let go. Jin Yi An didn't say anything either. At this moment, the wind and snow seemed to stop, only he was by my side. Then I fell asleep again. When I woke up again, Jin Yi An was nowhere to be seen. Yu Ning was afraid that I would worry, so she explained that Jin Yi An's health was not stable yet, and was forced by everyone to be isolated elsewhere to recuperate. By the time he fully recovered, it was already half a month later. Recently, I discovered that everyone was looking at me with somewhat strange eyes. That day, the old general with a face full of self-reproach knelt before me to apologize. "Your subordinate deserves to die. If I had known earlier that you and Lord Jin were so in love, I wouldn't have brought you two to the brothel. Although it's rare for men to love each other, but it's not without precedent." This time, the general and Lord Jin met true love in adversity. Everyone saw clearly, as long as it's someone the general likes, we will accept it. At that time, I was really embarrassed, so I had to change the subject and ask about the situation that day. From what others told me, I learned that when they found me and Jin Yi An, he was holding me tightly in his arms, afraid that I would be blown away by the wind and exposed to the sun and die. As for him, he was almost frozen into an ice pillar. He was brought back to the doctor to be examined. The doctor kept shaking his head, meaning that it would be difficult to save him. I was filled with doubts, and asked the old general. He should have returned to the capital. Why did he appear in the northern man's territory? The old general shook his head and said, "That day, Lord Jin rode alone for 1,000 miles, charging into the northern man, and no one could catch up. I have been fighting for decades, and I have never seen anyone ride so unprofessionally. The whip was almost broken, and even after 800 miles of emergency, he was not as fast as him." Shu had indeed told him, and for a moment, I felt that I had no face to face Jin Yi An. This time, we won a great victory, and the head of the northern man king was cut off under his horse and brought back to the capital. The emperor summoned me to return to the capital to receive the award, and accompanied Jin Yi An. On the way back to the capital, Jin Yi An kept his doors closed and did not see anyone. I asked the doctor several times, and he said he needed to rest and not see anyone. During that time, I only heard Shu collapse on his knees on the ground, bowing his head towards the capital, muttering, "I have failed the kindness of the princess consort, and the habit of homosexuality of the crown prince. I could not control myself. I deserve to die 1,000 times." After returning to the capital, the carriage entered the Ming Yi Palace, and there was no more movement. At night, when I returned to the capital, I entered the palace to pay my respects to the emperor. I held the Dan Shu Tai Quan in my hand and knelt down to beg for forgiveness. The emperor was very surprised. "You are a meritorious subject, why are you apologizing?" I said each word and sentence firmly. "I am a daughter, I have deceived your majesty, please punish me." The emperor's expression, from surprise to bewilderment, gradually became unsightly, finally sitting on the chair, speaking in a deep voice, "It is not easy, for this death-exempt golden badge, I almost lost my life. Hiding it for so many years, why not continue to hide it?" "Because I want to get married." The emperor said this was the most ridiculous reason he had ever heard. But I knew he would agree. Losing a young general with great achievements, and gaining a female marquis who could not inherit the throne, was a bargain that did not lose money. Finally, the emperor rubbed his forehead and smiled. "All right, northern man is pacified by your family, your father doesn't need it, Tran Bakhao will still fall into your hands. Whichever family's son you want to marry, I will grant the marriage." The crown prince of Ming Yi Royal Palace. The emperor pondered for a moment, then said, "Their family, why don't you say it yourself?" The Ming Yi Royal Palace's family is a prominent family, of course it can't be arranged just by words. I accepted the imperial edict to thank you. From that day on, I became the first female marquis of the Liu dynasty. That afternoon, I was rejected at Jin Yi An's place. Shu said politely, "Marquis, my master said that he saved your life, you must repay that favor. You cut your clothes and broke off your relationship. You are not benevolent first. My master chased after me from the capital to Baiguan, and tasted all the flavors of lovesickness. You must make up for it. That was indeed my fault." Jin Yi An brought up the past and I admitted it. He just wanted me to pursue him once. I didn't know how to pursue someone else, but I was willing to learn. After that day, my pursuing Jin Yi An caused a stir in the capital. The young ladies who admired Jin Yi An were all eagerly waiting to see a good show. But I only focused on the kitchen, learning how to make wonton noodles. Yu Ning threw up even while holding the bowl. "Sister, it really isn't delicious. Please don't make it anymore." "It's okay, to pursue a man, there's no need to poison him to death." I ignored it, and studied hard for several days, and finally made progress. At the same time, many cuts also appeared on my hands. That day, I brought the only bowl of wonton noodles to the palace. Now that I have great power and position, of course no one dares to stop me. I went all the way to Tan Dian's yard and saw him wearing a black cloak, caressing a plum blossom. This appearance was clearly meticulously prepared, like a pure sorghum flower, indifferent to worldly affairs. I recalled Yu Ning secretly complaining that he was a peacock with deep intentions, so I curled my lips, trying to hold back my laughter. Seeing me, he coughed lightly, and said coldly, "You're here." "Yes." I smiled. "Is your wound better?" Jin Yi An nodded slightly, his eyes glanced at the food box I brought. "Food?" I opened the lid, revealing a bowl of hot but unappetizing wonton noodles. "First time making it, you try it." My heart was pounding, looking at him worriedly. Jin Yi An didn't say a word, took out the bowl of noodles, took a big bite, and frowned. I knew, for Jin Yi An, who was used to eating delicacies, this bowl of noodles was too coarse and hard to eat. "Don't eat anymore." I was afraid that he would think I wasn't sincere enough, so I reached out to stop him. Jin Yi An grabbed my wrist and saw the dense cuts on my fingertips. These uneven noodles were all cut by me one by one. He swallowed and asked, "How long have you been studying?" "Not even a few days." He didn't say anything, lowered his head and finished the bowl of noodles. "Haven't I told you before, you're like a small jar?" I was dumbfounded and didn't understand. Jin Yi An tapped the table lightly, staring at my hand, "Don't know how to cry out in pain." I smiled, "It doesn't hurt." Jin Yi An touched the cuts on my fingers and sighed, "Asking you to pursue me is a dream." My heart tightened, "I can. These cuts, like stabbing into my flesh, I can't bear it." He clenched his hands, his eyes filled with pity, "No more chasing, Nin Nin, you've already chased me." When leaving the Ming Yi Palace, Yu Ning anxiously approached, "How is it? Did he bully you?" I blinked, came to, and slowly said, "I managed to catch up." "Huh?" Yu Ning was stunned, "Captured up? Just with a bowl of noodles?" My ears were red, and I nodded. Yu Ning's expression was strange, and after a while she burst out laughing, "This man is so easy to fool." "Ha! Ha! Ha! Ha!" He even swallowed my poison. I was embarrassed and covered her mouth with my hand. "The capital is not like Baekwan, be careful with your words." Yu Ning struggled, and suddenly stared at my lips. "Sis, what happened to your lips?" The redness spread from my ears to my cheeks, and I stammered, "Nothing." "Are they swollen?" Yu Ning looked closely for a moment, and her face immediately became unsightly, and then she screamed, "He kissed you, he dared to kiss you." My whole body felt like a boiled shrimp, dragging Yu Ning, who was about to kill Jin Yi An, to vent his anger, back to the general's mansion. That night, I lay on the bed, for the first time losing sleep because of something other than the war. I had prayed countless times for fate to show mercy. This moment, it finally came true. The next day, I went to look for Jin Yi An as usual, and found a long line in front of the Ming Yi Wang mansion. "Ta dung byuk, kio mot tu ben kan hoi, de la lam gi?" The servant couldn't help but laugh. "Your Highness, I heard that as long as you present a bowl of wonton noodles and a fragrant kiss, you can get the young master's attention." I looked over there, the swallows were graceful, and 100 flowers were blooming. They were all beautiful girls, radiantly young. Of course, they were better than me, who was nothing to talk about, 1,000 times better. I quietly put away the fragrant bag in my hand, standing still in front of the door, not knowing whether to go forward or not. Suddenly, the bright red door opened, and Shu walked out. He first bowed to the girls in front of the door, and slowly said, "Mrs., the young master said, wonton noodles must be there, and a kiss must also be there, but the most important thing is, your hands must be stained with the blood of the barbarians, your feet have walked through the north gate, you know how to wield a long spear, tame war horses, and love my master as if you don't love him, only then will he be devoted to you." After saying that, a sound of criticism rang out from the crowd. "This isn't a wedding, this is a wedding to the living king of hell. You'd better go directly to the Marquis's residence to propose." Immediately, everyone dispersed like birds, leaving only me standing alone in front of the door. Shu personally walked down the steps to greet me. "Please, Marquis, my master is waiting." I walked through the hallway, pushed the door open into the courtyard, and before I could stand still, a pair of arms suddenly hugged me from behind, pulling me into his embrace. "Why are you so late?" "I came as soon as I woke up." I defended myself. Jin Yi An said, "I missed you all night, I couldn't sleep." This sentence made me extremely embarrassed. He didn't hesitate to reveal his thoughts, clearly displaying his strong, undeniable feelings before my eyes, leaving my shyness with nowhere to hide. After a while, I stammered, "Me too." I took out the embroidered sachet from my sleeve. The stitches were messy and the pattern was also very ugly. Before I could say anything, Tandian snatched it away. I'll keep this. Don't give it to anyone else in the future. Okay. The next day, people from the Ming Yi Palace came to propose marriage. 3 or 4 chests of dowry filled the courtyard of the general's residence, even extending to the street. At the same time, the rewards from the palace filled the front of the residence. The emperor issued an edict, I will use the state ceremony to marry my subject, wishing that the 2 of you will have a good marriage, and will be of one heart forever. This is the highest honor for me. In the 3rd month of spring, I put on my wedding dress, rode on a tall and handsome horse, and took the identity of Wen Shi Ning, and brilliantly married Jin Yi An. Jin Yi An once said, you are an eagle in the sky, so you should spread your wings under the 9th layer of clouds, ordinary doors cannot confine you. I marry you, I don't need an 8-man palanquin to lock your wings, but give you the freedom to roam the mountains and rivers. Amidst the bustling sound of drums, Jin Yi An turned his horse's head and reached out to me. This year's spring was so beautiful, the sephora flowers were hanging down on the wall. I reached out to catch the young man from my dream. Through thousands of storms, may the mountains and rivers be steadfast, and may we grow old together. Complete. Side story, Xinbei Ho set out on an expedition in April. The willows were drooping, the flowers were white, the remnants of the northern barbarians were rebelling. As long as Xinbei Ho came to guard and clean up, it would take about half a year to make a tour. The entire court thought that this was a good thing. Xinbei Ho went around Baiguan, and this year the harvest of the people of Baiguan was stable. Only Lord Jin, before parting with Xinbei Ho, still had a warm relationship. As soon as Xinbei Ho's troops disappeared at the end of the road, his face changed from sunny to cloudy. As one of the emperor's favorite ministers, Lord Jin now held many positions, one of which was sitting in the imperial censor's office, taking pleasure in denouncing others. From that day on, everyone in the court was afraid. The ministers who supported Xinbei Ho to go to Baiguan, no one could escape. He seemed to have red eyes for killing, and investigated all matters, big and small, to the root, and the next day turned them into memorials, and they were on the emperor's desk. The emperor was delighted to see the success. In a month, the atmosphere of the court was clean, and all the demons and gods were at peace. As for the remaining time, Lord Jin buried himself in his study, writing letters from home to his beloved wife, 1 letter a day, sometimes 2 or 3. Another rainy night, Jin Yi An sat at the table. The lamp oil was already half burned, the candlelight was dim. Shu stood in the hallway and softly reminded him, Master, it's time to go to bed. Is there a reply? No. Jin Yi An was silent for a long time, suddenly walked around the room twice, and asked, Send someone to ask. How is she? Is she injured? Shu twitched the corner of her eyes. A few days ago, the Marquis said that the river water had caused the good fields to collapse. She had to stay on the dam for a while. It's normal that she didn't receive any letters. These things made Jin Yi An even more worried. The river water is overflowing, like a wild beast escaping from its cage. What is she doing there? Are all the officials in the northern land dead? While she was in a mess, Shu suddenly spoke up. A letter has arrived. Jin Yi An opened the door, hurriedly snatching the pigeon that had not been opened. Returning to the table, his eyes gradually became gentle. He gently pulled out the scroll, and carefully opened it. It was a familiar handwriting, stroke by stroke, majestic and magnificent. Zhan Xinjia, I have been on the dam for a few days, saw the people wandering, the sound of lamentation resounded to the sky. Sent someone to carefully investigate, discovered some suspicious things, the whereabouts of the commander-in-chief Zhaogo were cunning, can be investigated. This matter is important, temporarily not public, return to the capital to discuss. Jin Yi An propped his head up, reading each word and line 2 or 3 times, his heart was sweet but also a little disappointed. This kind of work tone, how could it be called a letter from home? Even the local memorials knew to ask a few questions. Damn her slow understanding, not even saying the word remember, not knowing if she was thin or fat. The lamp oil crackled once. The wind suddenly blew across the table. Turned the pages of the letter that were glued together. Jin Yi An suddenly stopped, a look of joy on his face. There was another page. He slowly peeled off the bottom layer, only to see 2 words. He stood up abruptly, bumping into the flower stand beside him. The sound of broken porcelain pieces flying out was clear in the dark night. Shu rushed in and saw his master running out barefoot. What happened to the marquis? He was surprised. Jin Yi An's face turned pale and he stammered, "It's broken." "Quickly prepare the horse. We can't go there." A piece of paper suddenly hit Shu in the face. He took it out and looked. "There is one more thing I want to tell you. These past few days I haven't had a good appetite, so I found a medical clinic and just found out that I have Jin family blood in my belly. Knowing that you are worried, I wrote a letter and sent it back to the capital, asking for the emperor's permission, and will return to the capital soon. I miss you, wife, Shi Ning." By the time Shu regained his composure, Jin Yi An was nowhere to be seen. Shu suddenly understood and shouted, "Your Highness, Your Highness. Something is wrong." After speaking, he also ran out. Beidi happened to have a few days of heavy rain, and the bedding was wet all day. Wen Shi Ning didn't eat much today, and her forehead suddenly ached in the middle of the night. She was probably pregnant, and her body couldn't bear the hardship. During the day, when discussing matters, she was tired, and Zhao Go took advantage of her weakness. Before, she wasn't upset about it, but now she was very upset. Her mood was extremely unstable. She turned over and touched the cold bedding, and couldn't help but remember Jin Yi An's warmth. She and he had actually shared the same bed, and it had only been for a month. Jin Yi An was not someone who was addicted to women, but that month, he had made her suffer enough. Those embarrassing scars that she did not dare to show to others, were all remembered by Jin Yi An in his heart. He said, a beauty lies in her character, and using her achievements as makeup, surpassing all other beauties in the world, and that he was lucky to have this unique beauty. Obviously, these were sweet words of coaxing, but Wen Shi Ning remembered them in his heart, savoring each word and sentence in the dead of night. Father once shook his head and said frankly, "The Wen family is infatuated. I am like that towards your mother, and you are like that towards Jin Yi An. I hope he can be as devoted to you as he was in the beginning." Wen Shi Ning had never thought about the future. Just like she had never expected to die of old age at home. How could a general die of old age on the battlefield? If she could go with Jin Yi An, she was willing to try it. The next day, she slept until noon, and as soon as she opened the door, she met Jin Yi An's eyes in the yard. She was silent for a moment, then slammed the door shut, slowly walking towards the bed, feeling that she was not yet awake. In the blink of an eye, the door was pushed open. Jin Yi An rushed in, hugged Wen Shi Ning, and threw her into the curtain. Without saying a word, she first stole a kiss, lingering until Wen Shi Ning was completely awake, and pushed him away. Only then did Jin Yi An let go, and said with a serious face, "I know I was wrong, carrying my child and running to the dam. I must be punished by family law." When Shi Ning's heart was slowly filled with sweet love, she pulled Jin Yi An's hand, and smiled. "You're still smiling." Jin Yi An turned his hand and grabbed Wen Shi Ning's wrist, gritting his teeth and saying, "Do you know what kind of person Zhao Go is? Do you dare to provoke him? When Wen Shi Ning is in a good mood, he will smile at people, perhaps because he is usually cold. A smile, like moonlight in a well, makes Jin Yi An want to go and get closer. He feels that no one has eyes as sharp as his. Wen Shi Ning's waist is the slimmest. Because of frequent battles, her lines are graceful and beautiful. Her arms and legs do not have any excess flesh, like an elegant deer in the mountains. He also does not want anyone to see the fierce possessiveness, and each time he caresses her, reaches its peak. Just thinking about his wife with a bunch of men, he becomes extremely jealous. It is the same now. Hearing that Zhao Go sat across from Wen Shi Ning and talked for a long time today, Jin Yi An secretly remembered it in his heart, but did not show it on his face. Wen Shi Ning thought he was really angry, so she leaned over and said, "What do you want to do to appease your anger?" Jin Yi An was full of evil, and said with a serious face, "I have to make her beg me." Wen Shi Ning was also willing to coax him, and blushed as she said, "Please forgive me, husband." Jin Yi An had never heard her speak in this tone before, so graceful and entangled, bewitching him, her dark eyes staring at Wen Shi Ning. Where did you learn that from? How could Wen Shi Ning admit it? This was something she had overheard when her subordinates were boasting about how their wives were so coquettish. Was it too strange? She felt a little embarrassed, and pushed Jin Yi An away. "All right, wake up." Suddenly, Jin Yi An kissed her, fondling her forcefully. "Continue, I like to hear." Bai Di had a lot of trouble because of Jin Yi An's arrival. Zhao Go kept a little guard, and no longer dared to look down on Wen Shi Ning in his words. Jin Yi An had completely replaced Wen Shi Ning's position, supervising the dam construction every day. By the end of the month, the dam would be repaired, and it was time to return to the capital. Jin Yi An prepared the carriage, took good care of her, and was very concerned, but in front of others, he fiercely ordered Wen Shi Ning to stay inside obediently and have less contact with outsiders. Occasionally, through the curtain, one could hear the kind teasing words of the rude men. Wen Shi Ning usually tortured them without mercy. Now he let a civil official come to serve him. After all, they were women, just looking for peace. Wen Shi Ning was too lazy to explain to them. She and Jin Yi An were childhood friends, and also people who shared life and death feelings for the long years. She fought in the four directions outside, and there was always someone behind her, acting as her unbreakable shield. Jin Yi An was afraid, but was willing to let go and let her fly away. In this world, no one understood her. Jin Yi An understood. "Ning Ning, look." Outside the window, Jin Yi An stood under the blue sky. On the horizon a flock of geese cried loudly as they flew past. In the blink of an eye, they had already crossed thousands of miles of mountains. Wen Shi Ning looked at him, smiling gently. In this life, she did not submit to morality and etiquette, but she would forever submit to the supreme gentleness that Jin Yi An brought. End.